Despite only making up 13% of American rhetoric, unsubstantiated statistics make up 50% of all bad faith arguments. On June 18, 1964, an elderly woman was pushed to the ground on her way home from the grocery store, and when she looked up, she saw a blonde woman running away with her purse. On the other end of the alley, a man saw the blonde woman get into a yellow car driven by a black man with a mustache and a beard. 4 days later, the LAPD arrested Janet and Malcolm Collins, a couple that fit all these descriptions. Neither the woman nor the other witness could confidently testify that these were the same two people they saw the other day, so the prosecutor brought in a statistician to estimate the probability that an innocent couple would also fit all these descriptions. He said, "Alright, check it. Let's say that this is a totally innocent couple, right? The probability that the man has a black hair is 1 in 10. The probability that the mustache is 1 in 4. The probability that the woman's white has 1 in 10, and she has blonde hair is 1 in 3. The probability that driving yellow cars is 1 in 10, and the driving yellow cars is 1 in 1,000. Now, if we multiply all of these together, the probability that an innocent couple happens to fit all of these descriptions is 1 in 12 million. The jury found them guilty. But if you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I will not let you just put a bunch of numbers in front of me and tell me what they mean. Absolutely not. In fact, I will turn you to 2017 Cameron to give us the basis for why this doesn't make any sense. If it's a raven, it's black. The converse of that statement is never brought up. No one ever said, if it's black, then it's a raven, because obviously that's not true. What we just calculated are the odds that if a couple is innocent, they will fit all these criteria. Like, yeah, obviously that's low. If you pull a couple off the street, just any couple, the probability that they fit this whole list of descriptions is very slim. But we're not looking for a couple that fits the criteria, we already did that. What we're wondering is, given a couple that fits the criteria, what is the likelihood that they are innocent? And that's a whole different set of numbers. And just to be clear, because like I kind of confused this at first, the 1 in 12 million odds doesn't mean that there are only like 3 couples that fit this description in the entire United States. It just means that every time you pull a couple off the street, that's your odds of all these things happening. So, supposing that there's, I don't know, 5 couples locally that fit all these descriptions, only one of them is actually guilty, which would mean that there's an 80% chance that any couple is actually innocent. The California Supreme Court eventually realized this, and the conviction was dropped. This is called the prosecutor's fallacy, and it's one of many ways that statistics can be misconstrued to support a certain agenda. And let's be clear, it can be very, very easy to deliberately manipulate stats in your favor. Politicians and advertisers do it all the time. That's why you should be really wary of anyone whose primary rhetorical tactic is just to rattle off a bunch of numbers without any analysis and then defend it by going, "Oh, I'm just stating facts." Cities with more churches have more crimes. How about that? You could quickly and rationally infer from that either that churches are somehow linked to crimes, or that more churches probably means more people, and with more people, of course you're gonna have more crimes. There are so many ways to lie with statistics. Today I just want to run through some of the most prevalent ones. Misleading visuals. Take a look at this graph from 2012. This shows the change in the top tax rate in 1 year if we allowed the Bush tax cuts to expire. Look at that, that's more than 5 times higher, right? There's a lot wrong here. Like right off the bat, you don't use a bar graph to compare 2 data points, but even if you did, you certainly wouldn't start the y-axis at 34. Hey, you can't do that. We're looking at a number 1 point higher than the lowest value to a number nearly 6 points higher. But 35 to 40 is not the same ratio as 1 to 6. This actually is not dissimilar to one way that people often misrepresent tax brackets, but oh my god, that's a whole different video. Now, the non-zero baseline is something that you'll see a lot in the media, but some organizations opt to just omit the y-axis entirely. Like, look at this graph incidentally listed in the Federalist right above the words misleading math. That's crazy! It looks like the abortions are up to almost 2 million a year. Wait a minute. These 2 lines have completely different y-axes. Where the lines intersect on the graph is just under 1.4 million for cancer screenings and about 312,000 for abortions. So, like, not the same number. The numbers graphed correctly looks more like this, and you'll notice that, wow, abortion rates really aren't going up that fast, and also, they have not intersected. Opinions on the subject itself aside, you have to admit that, like, these 2 graphs convey very different messages. Another easy way to mess with the visuals of a graph is to only show a portion of the data to make the change look less steep than it actually is. Or by squishing the graph way down into a teeny little graph. Look at that! Climate change isn't real. Faulty polling. Just the way a poll is phrased can have a massive impact on how it's answered. One way to do that is by asking a loaded question or providing loaded answers. Look at this actual survey that Trump sent out last year, or my take on it, which I would argue is just as valid. I'm filming this video before the election, and I have no idea how it's gonna age, but it doesn't matter. But faulty polling can be a lot subtler than that. Just look at this survey from 2014 from the GSS that shows that 58% of white people thought we were spending too much on welfare, but that number dropped to 16% when it was phrased as assistance to the poor. In fact, when it was phrased that way, 56% of people thought we were spending too little on it. Interesting. Conflating numbers and rates. You gotta remember the difference between hard numbers and rates. One of the most frustrating discussions that I had with someone when COVID was like first on the rise was when they tried to tell me, no, you want more cases because then the death rate goes down. Right, but the deaths go up. But the actual rate of deaths would be lower. This is me pushing my brain up. This is me sitting on the brain. This is gonna be goodbye. What do you even say to that? Let's just be overwhelmingly clear here. If we have 100 people with a disease and 5 of them die, the death rate per case is essentially 5%. Now, if we have 10,000 people with the disease, any number less than 500 means that the death rate has actually gone down. But hey, deaths are going way up. In fact, if we had 10,000 cases and 400 deaths, our death rate would technically have gone down by 20%, but the deaths have increased by nearly 8,000%. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're about to enter a third wave. Could have fooled me. On that note, here's another fun fact. Between the ages of 30 and 35, the chances of having a baby with a birth defect go up by 100%. That's crazy. That's basically a guarantee at that point, right? No, this video is about misleading. Have you even been listening? Here's the thing. The risk of birth defects at age 30 is about 0.1%. 100% increase from that is gonna be 0.2%. That's why percent changes can be really misleading because they're like entirely dependent on the size of the thing. For instance, the US GDP dropped 34% during the pandemic, and then we have since moved up 33%. But that doesn't put us at 99 because the actual number changed. So if you drop 34% and then move up 33, you're still 12% down from your original number. And when people talk about like unreliable sample sizes, they usually mean that the sample is too small, but it can also be too big. That's where we get this thing called Simpson's paradox, originated by one of these two, I imagine. Basically, this is the idea that if you combine a bunch of data sets, you'll actually get different results from the aggregate of the data than you would from each set individually. The most cited example of this is the UC Berkeley gender bias scandal. In 1973, a lawsuit was filed against UC Berkeley because someone noticed that they had accepted 44% of their male applicants and only 35% of female applicants, the latter of which had half as many people applying to begin with. So the college was like, all right, who did this? And then they looked at the acceptance rates for each of the departments and wait a minute, 4 of the 6 departments actually accepted more women than men. How did this happen? The disparities seem to come from the least selective and the most selective departments in particular. The gist of the issue was that more of the women had applied to the more selective departments, and then when you group them all together, that would bring their aggregate acceptance rate down. If I'm not careful, I'm gonna end up in an MRA video that's like, male privilege is a lie, femoid debunked. Please don't do that. But yeah, like if you really think about it, the average human has about 1 fallopian tube. The median number of legs per person is higher than the mean. 1 in every 5 babies born is Chinese. So if you have 4 siblings, which one of you is it? Basically, when you put too much data into one set, you get weird numbers and you can do weird things with them. Finally, let's talk about false cause. There are 2 primary ways to derive false cause from statistics. The first is assuming that correlation equals cause. In June and July, you notice that ice cream sales are going up and the rate of sunburns is also going up. So you ask, are ice cream sales causing sunburns or are sunburns causing ice cream sales? Or alternatively, might there be a third confounding variable? Like another reason that more people would be buying ice cream and also that more people are getting sunburnt? Just because 2 things happen to be correlated does not entail that they have anything to do with each other. Just look at per capita cheese consumption compared to how many people every year die by getting tangled in their bed sheets. The other way to derive false cause is by avoiding latent variables. Latent variables are things in the background that will affect the outcome but that we can't like measure and account for directly. So like for instance, if we had a low-income student and a high-income student take the same standardized test and the low-income student scored lower, we could infer that that's because they're less smart. But there's a variety of things that could have been impacting the student's performance. Like right off the bat, the quality of their school, that's not something you can measure directly, but it's something that you know is probably discrepant between the two. Like maybe they had a gym teacher teaching their math class. Maybe they just got a weird text that morning and they were thinking about that all day. The point is that you have to remember outside factors when you're trying to like derive information from statistics. And that's gonna bring us to our final point. 1350. Despite only making up 13% of the population, Black people are responsible for 50% of violent crimes. Now let's think about this. The immediate conclusion that people typically jump to is that Black people are just naturally more predisposed to violence and criminal activity. But okay, alternatively, and this is just a thought, it could be because like since the abolition of slavery, we've been cultivating a boiling pot of socioeconomic conditions for Black people in particular that's going to lead to a disparity in the crime rate. And because schools are funded by property taxes and the effects of redlining still last to this day, way after it was legalized. So we've got these like primarily Black, very low income areas with schools that aren't getting much funding, so they're not very good quality, and these same primarily Black neighborhoods are often over-policed, not because they're trying to like restore the community, but because there are people who think that like they need to inflict punitive justice on them, and then when you have more police, of course, you're gonna have more arrests. Also, a lot of the violence is committed by gangs which came about after World War II and the Great Migration, because we put in place a bunch of policies that like very much disrupted Black communities in particular. Could be because like the criminal justice system is riddled with both implicit and explicit bias that's going to lead to more guilty verdicts and harsher sentencing, and that's going to make it really difficult to get a consistent good paying job. But these people need to like help themselves and also their families, and if they can't do that by typical means, they're going to have to resort to atypical means, which are often illegal, and that's going to land them back in jail, which is going to make their life harder, and it's going to add more to the demographic. That's just a thought. I don't know, it could be anything. So now that I've said that, I will conclude by reminding you not to take information at face value. Not that numbers can't be trusted, but just to be careful. Because we know on this channel, I love numbers. Numbers are fun and interesting and cool, but we have to remember that numbers also lie. And oh boy, I'm filming this before the election. I have no idea how this is gonna age.